Hello and welcome to my channel. So I'm glad that you've come here today to take some steps to be proactive about your health and the health of your family. My name is Cynthia and I'm a licensed acupuncturist in Ontario, Canada. And what I want to show you here today are some great acupressure points that can be used to treat fever in children. Children can get some really high fevers, so it's important to know what you as a parent or caregiver can do to get them through it. First, let's go over some of the benefits of fever in terms of fighting an infection so that we understand when to try to reduce the fever and when to let it run its course. Fever creates an inhospitable environment for any microbial invasion, whether it's bacteria or viruses. Fever has always been the body's first response to wipe out the pathogen, and this has worked quite well at helping humans survive all sorts of infectious outbreaks. The body wants to maintain homeostasis, the exact right temperature and conditions for optimal functioning. Now, when the invading organism first enters the body, it also really likes the body's temperature at 37 degrees Celsius. So what the body will do is raise that temperature to create a bad environment. Even just a few degrees hotter than normal is all it needs to wipe it out. Now, of course, fever is uncomfortable, especially for children who tend to run higher fevers than adults. And in the modern world, of course, we have medications that can bring down a fever and stop this natural response. And while that may make us feel more comfortable in the short term, in the long run, suppressing a fever can also prolong an infection. The Chinese medicine literature explains that the first stage of febrile disease, meaning a disease involving a fever, within a day or so of the onset of a fever. The goal with adults who tend to run more on the cold side, the goal is to encourage the fever by keeping the body warm, taking a hot bath, having ginger tea, and wrapping up in lots of blankets in order to create a sweat. Now, since children tend to run quite hot anyway, the goal with children is just to keep them comfortable. You don't need to bathe them in cold water, but just try to keep them warm and comfortable. You can also encourage your child to rest and drink plenty of fluids. In the meantime, you can soothe your child with some acupressure on the following points to help clear the excess heat if they are showing signs of discomfort. High fevers in children will make them uncomfortable and they will not want to play or eat, and it's best to just keep them home. Call the doctor if your child seems unusually irritable or lethargic or complains of significant discomfort. If the fever lasts longer than 3 days, or for an infant less than 1 day, it's important to act fast, especially in the case of a young baby, because a serious infection can develop in young infants very quickly. If your child is younger than 3 months of age and has a temperature of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 38 degrees Celsius, or higher, you should call your child's healthcare provider immediately. Children between the ages of 6 months and 5 years can develop seizures from fever. Another thing to remember is the old adage, starve a fever, feed a cold. This is also congruent with Oriental medical theory. Generally speaking, food warms the body because food is an energy source. Children will often instinctively refuse to eat when they have a fever. They really aren't hungry because their body is busy trying to fight the fever. It's best not to try to feed them when the fever is present, and just know that when it passes, their appetite will return. What can work well in a fever is a cooling food like lemon. You can make a lemonade with fresh lemon juice and a bit of maple syrup, honey, or stevia to sweeten it. And this will feel quite refreshing because lemon cools the body and it also keeps them hydrated. So let's look at the acupressure points. This first point we're going to look at is called Governing Vessel 14. It's found on the upper back, base of the neck, right on the midline. So it's in a depression below the spinous process of the 7th cervical vertebrae. So just tracing your finger down the spine of the neck and just finding the highest bone, which is right at the base of the neck. So that high bone is the 7th vertebrae, 7th cervical vertebrae. And just going under that bone into a little depression. That is governing vessel 14. This point functions to clear heat in the body. It also releases the exterior, which is the Chinese way of saying any disease that comes from the outside, something coming from the outside in, such as a bacteria or a virus. It also regulates the Wei Qi. Wei Qi is the defensive energy in the body. So that's just the Chinese way of saying the body's defense system. Governing vessel 14 treats all febrile diseases, malaria, night sweats, aversion to cold, and common cold. Researchers also found that acupuncture on governing vessel 14 was more successful in reducing a fever than the drug control group. Now, the next point we're going to look at is found on the dorsum of the hand, so the back of the hand, in between the first and the second metacarpal bones, between your thumb and the forefinger. So when you hold these two fingers together, in the webbing between these two fingers, it's going to create a little mound, and that is large intestine 14. So you're just going to press into that point. This point treats aversion to cold, fever, and all febrile diseases. The next point is on the same channel, but going further up the arm to the elbow. So right at the elbow crease here is a point called large intestine 11. So with the elbow flexed, just finding the end of that elbow crease on the outside, where that crease ends is where you find the large intestine 11. This point clears heat, cools the blood, drains dampness. So dampness will show up as phlegm in the lungs, coughing up phlegm, and also sneezing is a form of phlegm leaving the body. And this point also treats all febrile diseases, fever, sore throat, malaria, and nasal obstruction. The next point we're going to find on the lower leg, just beneath the knee, a point called stomach 36. This is a great point for immunity for several reasons. One is that stomach 36 builds the defensive energy in the body, which is to say the immunity. And the second reason is that the stomach and digestive tract holds a lot of our gut flora, which are the biome, the gut biome, which is an important part of our immune response. Also, because in children's stomach and spleen systems don't finish developing until they reach about 7 years old. So until that time, their stomach and spleen are weaker, and that's why children are more prone to getting digestive ailments. So all the more reason to work on this point with a child. We're going to find this point on the front of the lower leg. We're going to go 4 finger widths below the kneecap and just finding the tibia bone here and then going 1 thumb width lateral to this tibia bone, and you'll find a point here called stomach 36. So you can do acupressure on these points for 30 seconds on each point. You can do this 3 to 4 times a day. You want to use just a moderate amount of pressure. Children don't need as much pressure as an adult does, so you want to go more gently. Just watch and see if your child shows any signs of discomfort, and then you know that you can just pull back a little bit. And then in terms of taking care of the gut biome, we always want to have healthy gut flora because it's such a huge part of immunity, especially if the gut flora has been destroyed from having taken antibiotics recently. You can build up the gut flora by supplementing with probiotics or by eating cultured foods. Cultured foods include Things like yogurt. You can have coconut yogurt or nut yogurt if they're not allergic. You can also use kombucha, raw pickles, raw sauerkraut, miso soup. Every culture has some form of cultured food, so you just want to make sure that the food has not been pasteurized so that the culture is still alive. A living culture can replenish the gut flora. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Thank you for joining me here, and I look forward to connecting with you in the next video.